Good morning, everybody. My name is Brandon. I'm one of the pastors here at Legacy. It's great to be worshiping with you today. Whether you're with us right here in the sanctuary or joining us online, we are glad you are here with us. We're in this series called I'm In. We're challenged to say yes to the invitation to follow Jesus, to surrender to his dreams, his passions, his desires for our lives. We're all invited to God's family because all of us, every single human ever created, is made in the image of God and are priceless in God's sight. And hopefully, we can see each other that way too. We all are priceless in God's sight. Last week, we learned we have much more influence than we think. We have much more influence with each other than we think because one word, one action, one text, one act of kindness can radically alter the trajectory of another person's life. You are influential for God's glory. Today in week 3, I'm invested. I'm invested in God's church. Now the reality is we're all invested in something, in stuff. The investment is much more than just passion or involvement or interest. When you are invested, you are fully committed, body, mind, and soul, to an endeavor, to a project, or to a person. It's like a breakfast of bacon and eggs. Great thing to order after church when you go to Perkins or Kroll's or wherever. But in your breakfast of bacon and eggs, the chicken is interested in your breakfast, but the pig is fully invested. That is the difference. That is the difference between being invested in or interested in something. And investment is where we are today. Now in the church, we use the word stewardship when we talk about how we manage or how we steward the gifts God has given us of our time and our talent and our treasure. There's this old saying that you can show me your checkbook and your calendar, and I'll show you your priorities. Or for this message, we say, show me your checkbook or your calendar, I'll show you where you're invested. For the younger ones among us, a checkbook is what we used to use to spend money out of our bank or check accounts before we had credit cards or debit cards, or we could pay with our phones or our watches. Now, I love paying with my watch. To this day, I still blow cashier's mind when I don't take anything out of my wallet, pay with my watch, and get on with my day. There was one night at Cashwise, I'm checking out with my groceries. There's an absolutely bored teenager checking me out. He didn't even say hi. He's just mindlessly scanning my items, and he's humming all of the ads he's heard throughout the day. So we get to the end of the transaction. I tip my watch, hit a couple buttons, and it beeps. And his eyes get huge, like he woke up from a deep slumber and he saw the best magic trick ever. And he says, "No way." Brandon Vetter bringing joy to bored cashiers all over Bismarck and Mandan. Now, we invest our time and our talent, our treasure in things that bring us joy. When we're invested, we take care of something. We nurture it, and we make sure other people are going to take care of it as well. We respect it. A few weeks ago, our vacation got COVIDed and our plans changed. And instead of driving around a minivan for a week, I got to drive around a 2021 Mustang convertible for my rental car. That was a big win, right? It was a delight to drive around an American muscle car for the week. But many, many people do not take care of rental cars. It's not their car. What do they care? They're not invested in it. So they're going to drive the heck out of it. The windshield wipers were shot. The tires needed air almost immediately. The back windows never went up when the top went up. That's apparently a known bug that needs to be fixed that has never been fixed. And every time we're at the stoplight in drive waiting to go, it felt like the Mustang was going to shake itself apart and I had to pick the doors up off of the ground. It was in desperate need of a tune-up. It was clear the previous drivers, they weren't interested in this car's longevity. They were not invested. So the question before us this morning, what are we invested in? Are we invested in things that are going to last? Where do we put our time and our dollars? If I looked at your calendar and your bank account, where are you truly invested? Now the Bible gives us some clear teaching on how we can invest our time and our dollars in internal projects for things that impact the world, maximum impact in God's world that is in need. We're going to start where we were last week with the Sermon on the Mount in the book of Matthew. You can follow along with me if you want to. We're in Matthew chapter 6, or it'll be on the screen behind me. Matthew chapter 5 to 7 is what we call the Sermon on the Mount. It is the longest single section of Jesus' teachings we've got. It opens with the Beatitudes that you've maybe heard before. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the peacemakers. And then Jesus gets into some specifics of what it looks like in various situations of how we live out these Beatitudes. We're going to be right in the middle of the sermon here in Matthew 6. We're going to start with verse 19. Don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. There's that checkbook and calendar principle again, where your energy goes. Where your time and dollars go, so goes your heart. So goes the driving force of your lives. We can all get caught up with so many things, and it can be small things like books. I fill up my Amazon cart with books and order them, this huge new stack, and I add it to the stack that's already in my office that I haven't gotten to yet, but I'm sure I'm going to get to it at some point. So I keep hoarding books for that day in the future when I'm finally going to read everything that's there. We can get so caught up with our cars, our motorcycles, our boats, our motor homes, all our hobbies, and we can neglect the relationships, the people around us. That matters so much more than our stuff. Possessions can absolutely own us. Possessions are stuff, they're not inherently bad in and of themselves. It's a problem when they own us, when they take all of our time and energy and resources, when some of that time and energy and resources should be going to the people around us, the people that we love the most, and building that connection with the God who loves us deeply. Things that don't last can keep us from being invested in what really and truly matters. Now, Jesus gives us an example of this from a story in Luke. You're in Matthew right now. You can jump to Luke. The next book is Mark. Skip over Mark, and you'll be in the book of Luke. It is Luke's biography on Jesus' life. It is Luke chapter 12. One day, Jesus is teaching with a crowd present, and somebody calls out an issue they've got in their family. They want Jesus to weigh in and solve for them. This is Luke chapter 12, verse 13. Someone called from the crowd, "Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me." Jesus replied, "Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that?" Then he said, "Beware. Guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." Everybody say it with me. Life is not measured by how much you own. Again, life is not measured by how much you own. One more time. Life is not measured by how much you own. In all of our advertising or marketing, we hear the exact opposite to get us to buy more stuff. This is a great verse to mark. Put it on your mirror. See it every day. Or maybe better yet, we should put it by our televisions wherever we see commercials so we can be reminded when we're looking for stuff and we see things we want, life is not measured by the amount of stuff that we own. So Jesus gets dragged into a family squabble. He gets stuck into a family argument that's been happening to families since, well, ever. He senses that the heart of this person asking this question, the heart is not that the person wants reconciliation or that he wants resolution with his brother. No, his motivation is dollars. It's greed, not the restoration of this relationship. And Jesus cuts through to the heart of the matter and then tells this story to illustrate his point. And it's a lesson in investment for all of us. This is verse 16. Then Jesus told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, "What should I do? I don't have room for all my crops." Then he said, "I know. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have enough room to store all of my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, 'Self, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for?' Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God." Here's a rich man who has plenty, and instead of sharing even from his surplus, he decides to store it in the bigger barns. Instead of pouring out what he has been given unto a world in need, the rich man keeps it for himself. He didn't know it, but his time had come. That's it. He builds bigger barns for himself, Doesn't even get to use him because he dies that very night. His possessions owned him. He was not investing in a relationship that mattered most, and the one that really mattered, he did not have a rich relationship with God. Friends, you are not a fool if you save, if you prepare for the future. That is excellent, that is planning, that is budgeting. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, was known to challenge Methodists to earn all they could, to save all they could, so they could build bigger barns to store it in. No. You earn all you can, to save all you can, to give all you can, to pour all that you can into a broken world, and to help, to pour out time and dollars onto this world in need. Now, this rich man is foolish because he did not build his connection with God. He was not being shaped by God. He was not going to worship. His prayer life was probably non-existent. Did he prioritize working with the poor that are often mentioned in our Bibles that are close to God's heart? I bet not. His greed, his selfishness led to a man who only stored and did not pour out any of his resources, time or talent, into a world in need that God loves. Now, we're called to be a generous people, a compassionate people, a people whose heart break when we see people in need, when we hear stories, when our hearts are moved to respond to needs close to home, like the homeless need in our own community, or the rise of the diseases of despair that can lead to suicide, or things we see far away, the impending hurricane bearing down on Louisiana, the crisis in Afghanistan leading to the deaths of soldiers, and a refugee crisis, people needing a safe haven for them and their families. We see these, we read about them, we see pictures, and our hearts break for these stories. These are real people made in God's image, just like we are being affected. And we're affected because God's heart breaks and our hearts break, and we're supposed to do something about them. Now, we can develop extravagant generosity in us, this passion to pour and not to store everything for ourselves, this investment in things that matter to God. And we can do it by keeping tabs, by keeping track of 3 things, and we're going to use the acronym HAT for it this morning. I don't look good in a hat, my wife tells me. My head is just too large for a baseball cap to look right on my big noggin. Now, my senior year of high school, they came around to measure us for our graduation caps, came to all of our English classes. Graduating class of 500, he's making his way through my English class. The guy comes over, pulls out his tape measure, measures my hat, and says, "We've got a winner." I'm like, "Well, thanks, dude. That's not something I wanted to win." This hat we're talking about, it is an acronym. It's an aid to help you remember these 3 things to cultivate in us so we can invest in things that matter to God, that matter to us, and we can pour out onto this world. First, we are called to have a generous heart. We need to keep greed out of our heart. Now, the Bible speaks many, many times the importance of our heart. But when it talks about heart, it is not the 4-chamber muscle that keeps us alive. That's important too. Talk to your doctor to keep your heart healthy. When the Bible says heart, the Bible means the place where all of our passions and motivations and desires and dreams come from. Proverbs puts it like this: guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. The rich man let greed take root in his heart and his desires and dreams, and so he harvests, storing everything for himself, and he dies, not even getting to enjoy his bigger barns. We need to constantly cultivate our hearts so that greed doesn't take root. Instead, so generosity can grow deep in our dreams, desires, passions, and motivations. We can get to the place where we can celebrate somebody getting an incredible new car like a Mustang or a Corvette. We can even learn to celebrate it without envy, without greed, without wanting to get one for ourselves. We can learn to be content with what we have and celebrate the joy of others. We can get there because we don't plant greed in our hearts, we plant contentment. We can plant contentment in the soil of our hearts with stories of life change that really matter to us, people who have encountered God and will never be the same again. And it happened because of our investment. To grow that rich relationship with God means we plant stories of kids' lives that are changed and legacy kids. Plant the stories of students encountering God through student ministry. We plant those in our hearts. We'll plant the stories of adults experiencing support and life change through our classes and our life groups, and they're finding a place to serve. If we plant those kind of stories in our hearts, then we're truly going to invest in the things that break God's heart. And we can be the people that are generous, that are pour out, stewarding our time and our dollars that God has given us. So we watch our hearts. We guard the place where all of our dreams and passions come from. Second, we need a change of attitude. There are two dominant attitudes we can have when it comes to the amount of time and dollars that we have: scarcity or abundance. Scarcity says there is never enough time. There is never enough treasure for what I need to do, much less what I want to do. When the pandemic began in March of 2020, we experienced a scarcity-induced run and shortage on toilet paper. There was plenty to go around. It didn't matter how many people told us this, we still hoarded it, believing toilet paper was going to go away. There was not enough. There was enough. We instead caused a scarcity-induced shortage. Now, instead of scarcity, we can have an abundance mindset. We have ample time. There are ample dollars to do what needs to be done. It might require adjustments to us, to our budget, or to make changes so we can do what breaks God's heart and ours. We can adapt to the abundance mentality by living out scriptures like this. You must each decide how much in your own heart, how much to give. Don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure, for God loves a person who gives cheerfully. Generous people prepare to give. They make a budget, they plan, they decide, they set a target, and they work at it as part of their budget. This fall, at the end of October, we're launching a new 3-year capital campaign to retire the debt on this facility and to keep enhancing our online campus. Does things like that stir your heart to remove